Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, wherever you are. Realizing this is an international podcast after all, and who knows when you'll be listening to it. Today, I'm going to be having a conversation with Zach Rattner. Zach Rattner is an author, he's an entrepreneur, and he's also CTO of a company called Yembo in the artificial intelligence sector. Welcome, Zach. I hope I got the company name correct. Was it Yembo?
You did. Yembo, that's correct.
Yeah, I quite
Good morning,
like that.
Mark. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, welcome. Tell us a bit about yourself. So you're in the software tech sector. Generally, it's a great place to be. It's had its ups and downs. Why did you want to work in tech?
So I've been a tech person, I would say, for a pretty long time. I remember when I was this might date me, but when I was in high school and the iPod first came out, there was a magazine cover of on Time magazine about the team behind it. And it was talking about like the commercial success it was going to be or whatever. Yeah. But the part that really stood out to me was there was a picture of Johnny Ive, the head of design at Apple, and he had graph paper, and there was the drawing of the iPod like on a desk. And I'm sure it was staged for the photo, but it just like clicked with me as a teenager that these products that people obsess over, use every day, they get embedded in their lives, but they don't just like appear. Somebody has to think about these details and draw them out on graph paper. And that was the part that kind of put the thought in my mind. And then everything else from there, I've been kind of one track mind. I applied to one school for university. I applied for one major in there, computer engineering. And coming out on the other end, I applied for one job at Qualcomm. And I always figured if that one thing didn't work out, then I would go check out the other majors, see what would happen. But thankfully, they did work out. And it's been quite a journey ever since. I don't think I could have anticipated where I'd end up now. But overall, it's been a lot of learning. I feel like in the tech space, you're never done. It's always, something's always changing. There's always something new coming out. And especially nowadays with AI, I feel like the progress that used to take 3 to 5 years seems to be coming in 3 to 5 months. So it's even accelerating faster now.
So what grabbed your imagination when you were a teenager? This idea of, was it having an idea and then the ability to be able to make that reality? Was it that excited you? Just something
I think that was certainly the
come
spark,
from your head.
Yeah, you have this idea, but then, and it almost seems commonplace now, but this was a long time ago, and I was just a teenager. But the main idea that I feel like I couldn't really get out of my head was you can influence so many people's lives for the better. Think about all the people that you can talk to in a day. If you have a busy day, I don't know, maybe 100. But if you make the scroll wheel interface on an iPod, then millions of people can use it. And it's just your reach gets so much bigger and wider and vaster in technology that if you look at the people that are available to you over the internet, that's one of the largest human institutions ever created. I mean, that's bigger than China, that's bigger than India, it's bigger than the Roman Empire. So like the ability that you have to improve people's lives is just magnified if you're in the tech sector.
Yes, that's very true. What was the first idea that you can remember that you had that you wanted to bring about and bring into reality that got you excited?
My first idea. So I was fortunate. My dad was a graphic designer growing up, and his company let him take a Mac home in the early 90s when I was a kid. And I remember he was trying to explain to me this concept of a web page, and he was telling me you can put this, it's like a piece of paper, like a document, but you put it on the computer and then other people can see it. People you never met, you don't even know they're looking at it, but you can put it out there for the world. And I thought it was kind of scary, but then I found my stamp collection that I had. So that was I guess my first one was maybe 1997. I used Front Page, and I put together scans of I think I had 6 or 7 stamps. It wasn't really that expensive. And we made a web page, and I think just my cousins and my aunts and uncles looked at it. That was about it. But again, it's like laying the groundwork that I feel like very fortunate looking back. That particular project, sure, that wasn't a huge commercial success or anything, but I
No.
feel like it puts the thought in your mind around um, how you can create things and other people can consume them, and you can kind of engineer the flows of when someone comes to the page, what is the order you want to present them with information, but like you can't control everything. You're putting it out there, and then people accept it, they reject it, they ignore it, they do something with it. And I feel like that's very much like modern product development too, where you have hypotheses around what your customers want to do, but you can't control them. And these kinds of mentalities, I feel like, kind of just pave the way for going into the software profession.
Mm-hmm. When your career started in this sector, what were the early challenges that you had, and how did you overcome them, or did you bypass them? Did you change direction?
In the early days, I felt like I was living in two different worlds. So I was in the computer engineering program at Virginia Tech, and that was very much focused on physics and hard science. And we had to learn to solder, for instance. We had to design our own circuit boards. We had to write low-level microcontroller codes, things like reading button presses and turning on and off LEDs. But my passion was really in the web. And I feel like there was some inherent tension there where I would get internships over the summer as a web developer. And I remember I had a professor who was gunning for me to do a master's program under him, but he was in really low level embedded system design. And he kept on telling me, I almost wish he had emailed it to me so I could have printed it out. But the advice was, any kid with their parents' computer can write JavaScript code. You need to stick with the real engineering and not get distracted. But then it was funny that I kind of didn't listen to him. And then when I graduated, most of my graduating class went on to like big FANG tech companies. And I was just curious about a year, and I was texting my friends, and everyone's like, yeah, I use JavaScript all the time. I use MySQL, like all these technologies that were kind of laughed at as hobbyist tools have kind of
Mm.
taken over the world now. And that's, I mean, there are still embedded systems and you still need them and all of that, but I feel like the web has kind of matured where it's not really a toy anymore. A lot of
Oh
people's
no.
livelihoods depend on it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's dominated a lot of people's thinking for a few decades now. When people
Mm-hmm.
think about starting a company, it's not long before they think about the web page, their website
Exactly.
that they need. It seems to be an essential component now. How much
Mm-hmm.
value they get from it is a different question, because I think a
Exactly.
lot of the time it's just like a document that's thrown into the middle of a desert. Unless somebody
Mm-hmm.
finds it, it's not going to be of a lot of value. But it's very much in all of our thinking. So, did
Mm-hmm.
you get involved with um, sort of website design and functionality and making it efficient and effective, or did you go in another direction?
Yeah, I think that was kind of step two. So I was a hobbyist as a kid, then I became a teenager. My parents told me it was time to get a job because I wanted them to buy me things, and they said I needed my own money. So okay, went and got a job
Yeah.
at a deli, and was making sandwiches about 8, 9 hours a day. And then I would come home, and again, I'd still enjoyed tinkering with computers and things like that. So I found some freelance sites. And the thing that really stood out to me then was it was all over email. This was before Zoom. So people didn't really know that they were talking to a teenager. I would just bid on projects, I'd do the work, and then it wasn't until there was one project I'd worked with the guy for about 4 years, and then LinkedIn kind of became a thing, and he saw that I was graduating high school in a couple of years, and he was like, "Wait, you're a kid?" But that was really eye-opening because I would spend my whole day on my feet making sandwiches, and I'd get exhausted, and I was
Yeah.
it was a good first job, but like it wasn't. I didn't see my future like running a deli. And
No.
then I'd come home and I would get to work on someone's video game or somebody's website or make a flash animation and work not quite as hard. The pay was about the same, like 2 hours of work here versus the whole day of work there.
Mm.
um And it was kind of random, like it was just freelance projects. So they'd come, they would go, I'd go on vacation, I'd not bid on anything. So I wasn't really thinking at the time about it becoming a career path, but I feel like the part that was really interesting was communication skills that you learn from doing that, being able to break down requirements. You learn a good poker face. I had one client who he wanted his webpage to be light text on a dark background, and we had some back and forth over how dark the background should be. And I ended up getting frustrated and making it flat black, so it can't get any darker. And he told me, it was a funny email, make the black blacker. Like his monitor wasn't quite calibrated right, so that when I put flat black and on the background, it showed up as like a soft gray. So we had to have that conversation. But I feel like the skills that I kind of put in there really led the way to what I'm doing now. Where running a company, you're constantly juggling multiple requirements, trying to figure out signal from noise. You have to deal with tech debt as well. The company's been around 7 years, and there are some decisions that I made 5-6 years ago in my co-founder's living room when that was where all of the work was getting done. That is still in production today, and we need to maintain it. So I feel like I didn't really realize it for what it was, but just kind of like dabbling in those early days really kind of laid, in my opinion, some fundamental skills.
So when did you start Yembo?
Yembo started in 2016. And the background was I was working at a big tech company called Qualcomm, and we were chartered with looking at artificial intelligence technology. So I had multiple jobs throughout my time there, but at the time before I left, I was working on AI, because Qualcomm's known for their telecom technology, but they're actually very strong in mobile computing as well. They make the processing chips, not just the part that talks to the cell tower in the phone. And AI was kind of having its heyday. So if I can have permission to maybe nerd out a little bit with you on this. So this was 2016, and there was this competition called ImageNet, which was the academic benchmark for identifying objects and images. And I don't know if you're familiar, if your audience is familiar, but you can think of it like a 1,000-way multiple choice test. So I can show you a picture about, hey, here's a barn with a hay bale, or here's a horse on a rider. And as a human, you can very easily tell. But for a computer, the challenge is, can you write an algorithm that would detect that? And sometimes it's objective, and sometimes there are multiple things in an image, and you have to kind of tell foreground from background and what's the subject. You mentioned you're a photographer, so I'm sure you've you had to deal with these things a lot.
Yeah.
But it's very difficult for algorithms to do that, or at least it was at the time. So this group got together, and it was an academic competition. So universities would submit their solutions, corporate research arms would, and there was a benchmark that was done that said that a typical like college educated human was about 95% accurate. So that means if you were to show a person these tests, they would get about like 1 in 20 wrong, 19 out of 20 right. And what happened in 2015 was the best advancement, the best algorithm that was submitted by Microsoft actually beat that threshold at 95. So for the first time in human history, computers are better than people at identifying objects and images. And if you went on Google News that day, nobody seemed to know about it. It was like kind of relegated to this nerdy corner of academia.
Which is surprising, because if you think about when the computer first beat the top grandmaster chess players, most people got to hear about that. And I think that was in the late 90s, sort of about 97 or something. It's surprising that, I suppose perhaps it's a bit more difficult for people to relate to, the average person in the street, in what it's doing, but it's still a big news. It's significant news, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it took some killer use cases coming down the road to kind of bring it into the public psyche. I mean, Tesla's self-driving cars, I think, is an obvious like version of that. Google has Google Lens, where you can like take a picture of anything, it'll tell you details about it.
Yes.
But the underlying technology, the thing that really changed, was this approach called deep learning. And the traditional way to identify objects and images was a tedious way of doing it by hand. So if you want to detect a chair, you'd have to write code that would look at, this looks like a straight line, we'll call that a leg. This looks like another one. So 4 legs plus a back plus a seat, that equals a chair. And then someone comes up with an office chair and you're back to square one. You're like, okay, it's not
Yeah.
quite the same. It's a little bit different. But what deep learning allowed you to do was it was biologically inspired. So you could show it examples of, hey, these are chairs and these are beds and these are giraffes and these are cats. And the algorithm would learn on its own based on the data that you give it. So that means that the work that you had to do actually carried forward. So if you spent all this time in the olden days of like detecting a chair, it wouldn't really help you detect something new. But with deep learning, it just became a function of data. And so that was one kind of track in history that was happening. There was the migration of big data and moving to the cloud that was also happening. So people were sitting on tons of data. And then there was Moore's law going on that was bringing the cost of compute way down. So the cost
Yes.
of compute's getting lower, the data sets are getting bigger, and the algorithms are getting more sophisticated to be able to do things with that data. And then it all kind of comes together around that 2015, 2016 era, and deep learning has its heyday, and we're still using it today. I think the latest round of generative AI is still drawing its roots back to some of the fundamental things that were done there. So all kind of came to a point, and that's where Yembo started.
Okay. So was this a competition that was open? Was it? I mean, was it run in the form of a competition to say who could beat this score?
Yeah, there was a competition. The winners were judged by your error rate. So you want to have the lowest possible error rate. And then they would all be ranked. So the data set was common. So we were all looking at the same data set. The ground truth was known. You'd run it through your algorithm and then see which ones you got right, which ones you got wrong. Now I
Was it?
didn't.
You didn't enter.
Yeah, I didn't participate in that.
Right.
But I was on a team that was kind of looking at, what do we do given that this technology works? So I would say I was adjacent to it at the time.
Right.
So I knew that computers were better than people at identifying objects and images. And I would say I was hungry for a use case because it seemed like people didn't really know about it. And my wife was working at a moving company at the time. And we were both from the East Coast originally. We moved to California when we got married, and she tried to quit to move across the country, but the company liked her and they said, hey, why don't you just work remotely? Because it's an international move division that she was in. So most of the clients were in other time zones anyway. And it turned out to be one of the best decisions in hindsight, because I'd come home from work and I had have like direct insight into the back office of a moving company. And what happened there was, you could see her job as a coordinator was just to bring together all the operations and the logistics so that the move goes smoothly. So I got to see how well things could go if everything was planned correctly, and the host of horrors that can come up if things are not planned correctly. If somebody underestimates and says, oh, a 12-foot truck will be fine, but you really need a 16-foot truck. It was her job to basically figure out, what are you going to do next when you have like the customers getting on a plane tomorrow, the house is selling, and you end up needing more time to do the move. So it all came down to, we realized these visual inspections are really key. And we were buying our house, and our local real estate agent had just started a moving company of his own. So he's talking shop with my wife, and they both bring up to this point where they're talking about, yeah, it's just really hard to get an accurate estimate. Because if you're moving and I walk around your house, I need to know the volume and the weight of the items that are going to be there. But it takes like a trained expert to know. Like if you ask me how many boxes my books behind my head would go into, like you need to have done it before to be able to give a good answer on that. So people get hurried, and they maybe estimate. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. They overlook things. They'll forget, oh, there's a closet, or oh, there's a garage. Up to 40% of the size of a move sometimes happens in garages. So you forget that it's kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
So we got to see there's this sea change that's happening that's kind of affecting all industries. It looks like everyone was focusing on self-driving cars and drones, and like a relatively few number of highly competitive industries where any one player, I would say, is probably not that likely to succeed. But then there's all this other stuff going on and these people still have jobs and they're still important. And AI didn't really seem to be catered to them. And that was kind of the genesis for Yembo. The more I learned about the space, the more I realized I couldn't get it out of my head almost that computers are better than people identifying objects, and these industries are having real trouble, and it's not for lack of trying. I mean, there's a lot of great moving companies that really mean well. It's just it's labor intensive. It's you can't really standardize everything because everyone's homes are a little bit different. So you have to use judgment on in oftentimes. And it's also not just moving. So if you look at a lot of home services, any industry where you might call like a plumber or a painter, property insurance, remodeling, like usually that the sales process starts with someone coming to your home and taking a look, because that's what it takes. So that was kind of the genesis. And then we realized that we were going to build a tool that would create something that's easier for customers to use. When people hear AI, they oftentimes jump to Terminator and these kind of scary thoughts.
Yes, they do, yes.
But what I would say is what we built now, if you look back at it, is Yembo provides a tool that streamlines the kind of tedious stuff, counting how many boxes the books are going to go in. It doesn't build rapport with the customer. There's a lot of things that a human is uniquely positioned to do. And this is where I see AI kind of getting more embedded and more adopted in everyday lives. I'd like to move on from this narrative like the Terminator style AI versus human. I think AI with human is a much more realistic view of the world. And in our world, you couldn't ever replace a human. So the AI can go around and detect what's there, but then it'll just detect what's there. So if you want to get on a call and deal with the like the logistics of that around hey, when do you have a truck available? What parts are really important to you? We can make sure we can pack those in a special way. That the AI kind of just helps say, I think this thing needs to go into 10 boxes, but the overall work that's involved in having a really great moving experience is so much more than that. So it kind of allows the human to focus in on areas that humans are really good at, and it allows the software to take over the parts that are that make that a bit more tedious. And then you get this end result that's kind of the best of both worlds, where a traditional survey takes about 60 to 90 minutes without any kind of software. If I'm just walking around in your house with a clipboard, typical Yembo takes about 15. So we shrink the time down. But if you look at CSAT scores of customer satisfaction, they're actually higher on the shorter side because the customer feels like their time was respected better and they feel like they had a better experience. And then if you look at the output that you get from that, it's not just like a number written on a Post-it note saying, hey, I think this is going to be an $8,000 move. It'll be actual pictures of all the items that are there. So because of these items, then the quote will be this amount. And then you can give that to the crew and they can be prepared. They can bring all the right equipment so that your move can be like go smoother on the actual day. And I feel like that's kind of got misunderstood along the way sometimes, where people, they just heard AI and there were adoption challenges where they didn't want to log in because they were worried about, is this going to replace me? But thankfully, we were able to demonstrate with a few of our clients that it's not a replacement tool. It's a tool that makes you more efficient. It kind of takes the tedious parts out of your day, but it doesn't replace the human aspects of it. And then we had some case studies and we're able to show a lot of this industry is commission based. So if you're able to have 3 to 4 times as many conversations in a day, then that's good for your top and your bottom line. I think that's just one thing in hindsight that I wished if I had gone back and could do it all over again, that I would have planned for the perception. We just focus so much as an engineer. I like to tinker, I like to build, focus so much on, can I do this? That how is the world going to perceive it once I do this? I feel like we could have afforded to spend a little bit more time on.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of people whose probably their primary education about artificial intelligence comes through movies. They've seen the movie of the artificial intelligence robots that goes rogue and kills people, and that's not the reality of what we have today. in some respects, artificial intelligence does gain a lot of interest, but it's just a term that somebody came up with
Right.
to be able to put certain software techniques into a box and to say that's just
Exactly.
artificial intelligence, really. And I think you're right. In some respects, it does hold it back. So you had developed a tool that would be used visual identification. So for instance, if it went into a library room, you would be able to scan those books and it would, I'd say, how many boxes those books would go into. It would be able to calculate that, would it, from a visual capture?
Yeah. So the main two things we'd identify are we'd look at the furniture items. Basically, if you go in a room and you move a camera around, 10, 15 seconds per room is usually enough. We want to identify everything that would need to go on a truck if you were to move that. So that means the furniture. So I see a table, I see chairs, and then also like bookshelves, the packing materials that would be needed to do that. So when people move, they don't typically move a couple items. They don't typically move just one room. And this was the key from the technology perspective, was people move everything. So if you go in this industry and you want to get good at it, you're not going to get a pass if you are only good in a kitchen or only good in a living room. You have to go everywhere. So that was kind of the reason we wanted to start in the moving space. Was it's a very, I would say, unforgiving use case from a technology perspective, because it forces you to get good everywhere inside the house, and that opens up other opportunities that we've since started adding on other markets and things like that.
I was going to say there are many other applications for that technology. Could definitely have a chat with you about some of those maybe afterwards. So where is the business today? Because I was looking and it seemed to be focused around artificial intelligence used as part of survey forms. Is that correct?
Yeah. In this industry, the visual inspection that happens before a job is called a survey.
Yep.
So right now we have about 70 employees worldwide, about half that in the US, the other half internationally.
Yep.
We have customers in about 20 different countries because moving is very networked. So usually if you're moving internationally, most companies don't have presences in every country. So we've gotten a lot of referrals around, actually we entered the UK on a referral. We had an international move from New York to London, and that visual inventory was printed out. So the crew that was in New York was a Yembo customer. The one in London wasn't. And they were going through and they saw the items that were identified by the AI and reached out. So it's kind of interesting just how the moving industry is very networked. So we have customers in about 20 different countries, and we more recently added on our second vertical in property insurance. So we have the moving business, and then we also, in parallel with that, have a separate engineering team that's building out a product for similar workflow, but just different industry. So if you are getting a new homeowner's insurance policy, you have a similar kind of workflow you have to go through. And if you have damage claims in that industry, also a similar kind of workflow where a trained expert usually has to go out. They usually do some kinds of inspections, and then a report is generated, and then like pricing decisions are made off of that. So I would say the fundamental technology that we need to build is slightly different around like the things that you need to detect, but the overall workflow is essentially the same.
So the business has grown. You've started to diversify into different areas. What do you think are the biggest lessons you've learned in that journey?
I think there have been a few. I think there's that mantra of if you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
Rubbish advice.
Yes.
I think understanding the customer need and starting there. As an engineer, we get drawn to these like technically interesting challenges. But I think one of the biggest things I've learned is how do you quickly validate if you're on the right track or not? There are a lot of things that you can do shy of actually building something to validate that you're kind of on the right path. So I think one of the best ones we did right was before we wrote any computer vision code, we kind of, my co-founder and I like listed out the scenarios that would prevent it from ever seeing the light of day. So scenario number one is, are people even willing to do this, right? If you're used to someone coming to your house and I say, hey, I'm not going to come to your house, here's a link, go click it and scan some videos. If you're concerned about privacy and aren't willing to do it, if you are like not convinced that it's worth the time, even though it's going to be quicker, but if you don't know what the alternative is, you may not understand that someone's saving you time. So there are all these concerns that are basically, if I can't get people to record a video, I don't care how good the AI is, it doesn't matter. It's like not the right market. And then the second part was, if I can record a video and a trained expert who I'm trying to build the software for can't make an accurate quote out of it because like there's information that they lost to customers that are maybe not scanning the whole room and things like that, then I would say that's also not viable. I think that was one thing we actually did a good job on in hindsight, was we kind of de-risked these things where we built the software, we gave it to a couple of local companies for free or near free. And we just said, hey, in return, I want to get data on, is this accurate or not? Are you able to get a quote, and are people willing to download? And what we saw was people weren't just willing, that they preferred it, right? Like you'd have to stay home from work otherwise. And, you know, when you get those delivery windows from 12 to 4 p.m., someone's going to show up. Like it cut that out, which was really valuable.
It's always a big irritant, that is.
Big irritant. And then it just goes away, because now you don't have to schedule a live call. You can just record the videos, the AI watches it. I could do it at 10 o'clock at night if I want, and the mover just checks in the morning and then can text me back, and we can figure it out, not live.
Yes.
So we found those kinds of things before we had any computer vision. And then I would say the next part that we learned was AI it's all a probability game, right? Like you mentioned, it's a term for a jumble of algorithms, but at the end of the day, it's just math. And these things they're all statistical models. So AI is never certain. It'll tell you it's 99% sure about something, but getting to 100 is like a pipe dream. That's why I think self-driving cars still aren't quite as prevalent as it seemed like they were going to be 5-10 years ago, is because you get these long tail of issues you got to solve, and it just takes forever. So what we were able to do is we had, I would say, an intellectually honest value proposition, even though the AI wasn't at 100%, because I save you the drive, and it maybe would take 30 minutes to review, and I can cut that down to 25 because I can detect a few items. And then as the AI got better, it got gradually more and more advanced. But all along the way, there was like a reason where a customer would want to do this. And that's something that I just feel like from startups that I talk to now, from friends that tell me they have like an idea, that they always seem to jump straight to what they want to build. And I like to see more work around like validation around that someone would actually be compelled to change their behavior and use the new thing.
Yes. Yeah, that's very true. Is breaking somebody's habitual behavior is a big task. There has to be a really big payoff in order to do that. Not just a slight one. It needs to be a really big one. You've got to get that differential to be able to break habits, because people feel more comfortable with what they know and what they've done before, and that it works, even if they appreciate that it's not as efficient as what could be. They'll probably still stick with where they are.
Yeah, there's that general rule of thumb that if you want to replace the way something's done in technology, it has to be 10 times better. That if you make something that's like 2 times better, that the benefits aren't worth the switching cost, that you really need to make it like a no-brainer, which is totally unfair. But I would say kind of all progress is kind of dependent on it, right? Because we have finite amount of time, finite amount of attention. And if I spend an hour of my time to gain 62 minutes back, like it's not really like going to move the needle in the grand scheme of things.
So where did you get to with your equation? How much time or increased efficiency did you calculate you were able to provide with your solution?
Sure. So I think where we're at now is we look at this as a function of time. A lot of the folks that work in this industry are either commission-based or they're paid hourly. So I would say that's not maybe a universal truth among AI models, but in our business, there's a real cost to having a workflow that takes 60 minutes versus 30. So what we're able to see now is that we can do about 3 to 4 times as many surveys with the same manpower in a given day. So that means that if I don't have Yembo, I'm limited to maybe like 3 or 4 a day, because I'll have to get in the car, I have to drive around, I have to ring doorbells. Whereas with Yembo, um, you can do much. You're not getting in the car. You're able to go back to back, and the quality of your conversation is higher, but the duration is shorter, because you're not asking questions around like how many items are in that bedroom, or
Mm,
how many books, how many book boxes do you need, and things like that. So a typical survey can be done in about like 20-ish, 15 minutes. And
right.
that part I feel like has been like where the real value has been had. Is we've had some clients that have been able to significantly expand their business. We've had folks that have been able to go into new markets they couldn't otherwise. They said, I just can't afford to drive and burn the gas to drive 100 miles down the road for a job I don't know I'm going to get.
Yes.
But I can send them a link, and now I can like credibly compete in this new area where I didn't have the ability to before. Um, and because the time is less, we're also noticing that people are able to kind of tailor and focus more on jobs where they can do a really good experience for their customer. We've even seen some folks hand off jobs and not take it and give it to like somebody in their network, because they said, hey, um, like I'm stretched really thin the day you need to move. I think you're going to get a better experience from this other client, and they hand it off. So it allows the customer, the end user who's actually receiving the services, to have a better experience, and then it allows the operator who's running the show behind the scenes have a more like smooth experience. So I feel like for us that metric was um like kind of time saved, but that's maybe not, it depends a lot on the market that you're in and the workflow and things like that.
What do you think is the biggest misconception for somebody who's in the software industry and running a business in order to achieve successful growth? What's the thing that you learned that actually really a big myth? Because there are a number of things that I've seen over the years that have held people back because they hold it as a fact, and actually that holds them back. What did you discover?
Yeah, I
What
think
did
as
you
humans
realize?
we all get these ruts that we go into, and these are what
Yeah.
we call a rut, like a preconceived notion of how the world works that may or may not be in tune with reality.
Yes.
um, and with technical folks, myself included, um, I think there's a truth that gets taken too far, and that truth is that like a real technically differentiated product needs to have some amount of needs to be the first at something, right? Like we want to be the first application of a new technology. We want to do something better or faster, and it needs to be like the blankest, fill in the blank, whatever that may be.
Yes.
And I would say I get where it's coming from, right? Like you don't want to just be a Me Too copycat, um, cobbling
Mm,
together things from off the shelf parts. But I feel like the thing that gets missed a lot is customer need.
mm,
And if I go and I make some business process that people enjoy doing 50%, like, hey, I can make your lunch break 50% faster. You may get some pushback because like there's no business value in optimizing and streamlining that. So I
no.
feel like not getting distracted by like new shiny technology, and just getting obsessed instead about solving a real customer pain point, is like this mindset shift that I continually, with my team, myself, I feel like we have to like keep ourselves in check and say like, yeah, I saw this paper come out. That's really cool, but here's our workflow. Here's the industry we operate in,
Yeah.
and like kind of redirecting that attention from wanting to just build something new and shiny, but like to actually wanting to understand the day in the life of your customer and make their lives better. Um, Same amount of energy, I would say, but it's kind of like redirected. I just hear so many pitches from like friends of mine, and they'll say, hey, it's like a joke with my wife and I, like you get a text, I have an app idea, can we talk? We're just like, no, I'm busy. But like a lot of times when you take those calls, the person has like some news article they read or something they played with, and they're like, I want to do that for this industry. And there seems to be like a oversight around like, does this industry want it? What are their incentives? What are they motivated by? What are their fears? And how can you give them a tool that makes them a superpower instead of giving them a tool that makes you brag about how awesome your tool is.
I think there's
Which is like a common
I,
thread.
yeah, I say I get sent lots of investment decks and people approach me that have an idea. I think there's an overestimation of the value of an idea in bringing about a
Mm-hmm.
successful business. You know, on a scale of 1 to 10, I might give it a 1 out of 10. Okay, that's the
Mm-hmm.
idea, but there's a lot more that's got to happen. And I think on the other side is, which was leading back to your point, I think that there are people that are thinking they've got to have a totally unique product or to be the first. And actually, quite often, you'd be better off being perhaps part of the second wave because the
Right.
first wave get burned and they have to educate the market and they learn a lot of lessons. And you've got that second wave advantage of being able to learn from the mistakes that they made. Not
Mm-hmm.
always, not always the case, but it doesn't have to be that you've got something is totally unique and you are the first. There's dangers involved with that, and you have to be aware of them. You've written a book with the title I like, actually, really good. It caught my eye. Grow Up Fast. I think that's well. Tell us a bit about the book. Was that the approach? Did you have a very sort of hard and realistic approach when looking at your own business and the things that you were doing?
Sure. So the book Grow Up Fast, I have a copy right here. It's called Grow Up Fast: Lessons from an AI Startup. Took me about a year to write, and I was noticing that these lessons that I had learned about getting the product off the ground, a lot of the times it was me and my co-founder or a very small team, and we made what turned out to be very substantial decisions that allowed the company to grow. But a lot of the people around at the company today weren't around then. Um, and I was worried that if I didn't put my thoughts to paper, that they'd like evaporate. I have a hard time thinking about what I had for breakfast last week. So I was just worried, like if I wait till I'm looking back 20, 30 years in the past and trying to write down lessons that I'd have forgotten. Um, and we digested down the 6, 7 years that I've been running the engineering team at Yembo and put it into like bite-sized lessons that I learned around product development, managing a team, using AI, identifying use cases that are good for AI, things that are it's not so good for. And I found it to be pretty, the feedback I've gotten from folks is that it's been pretty helpful, just because it allows you to kind of succinctly summarize what was 7 years of life and all the things that have come in from that. I think another big lesson that we learned that we talk about in there is in the early days, it seems like almost every risk is existential, right? If you have like 1 or 2 customers and one of them talks about canceling, that's a big deal, things like that. And we kind of overlooked celebrating the wins. So one of
Mm,
the lessons that we talk about in there is that celebrating the wins can be just as important as fixing a problem, because you're building a culture, and if your culture is just go from one problem to the next and never highlight things that were done well, then you can have problems where people don't always understand what is done well because
mm,
we never praise things. So even if you take the selfish view as a manager that says I just want to I want the right thing done and I want to minimize my time, I would say that celebrating the win still kind of stands on its own 2 feet because you're enabling the team to identify, highlight outcomes that you as your business want to achieve. And we've done some fun stuff with it. We actually got a relationship with a fine silver mint, and when we get a patent, it's a lot of work. It takes a lot of effort. We'll
mm.
actually mint a coin with the inventor's faces on it on the coin, and we put the serial number of the patent on it.
Right.
And like that gesture in of itself, it's kind of goofy. Everyone we gave a coin to, they're like, "That's cool. I've never been minted in fine silver before." Um, but it has like a
Yeah.
this
It's part of
effect
that
where
idea
people
of
are like,
celebrating the win, isn't it? Yeah, I like that.
exactly, and it gives something you leave on your desk, and someone comes by and goes, "Hey, what's that?" And it's like, it's a good talking point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think these are the kinds of things that I wish someone had told me 7 years ago when I was starting the company. So I figured if I can if I can leave it there for someone else, then the world's better off.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading the book. Actually, I will do. If you can get a copy to me, I'll have a read of it, and maybe I'll do a review of it and put it onto our website, maybe post it out on LinkedIn.
For sure, I'll get you a copy after the show.
Super. Okay. So if somebody wants to get a copy of the book or reach out to you, or they want to find more information about your company, how can they do that?
Sure. So the company is called Yembo, Yembo. So you can go to yembo.ai. There's a contact form there, so you can reach me that way, or you can look me up on LinkedIn. And the book is called Grow Up Fast. Grow Up Fast is on Amazon, a few other bookstores as well, and we actually just launched on Spotify. We have an audiobook that came out earlier this week. So basically, anywhere books are sold, if you go and punch in Grow Up Fast, Lessons from an AI Startup, you should see it come up.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. One final question before we finish the podcast.
For sure.
A new entrepreneur just about to come into the industry, wants to start his business. You're going to give him one piece of advice to help him throughout his career. What are you going to tell him?
I would tell him, make sure you know why. Make sure you know why you're going to want to do the business. Make sure you know why the product decisions you make, why they need to be there. If you decide to take outside funding, that comes with a whole host of responsibilities. Make sure you know why. And don't just go through the motions because you have a friend who did it or read an article about that. But I would say there is a lot that's common among business, but also no two are identical. So you need to understand what's different about yours. And if you can justify why, a lot of things kind of go right afterwards. So I would just make sure you know why.
That's a great piece of advice to finish. Thank you very much, Zach. I've enjoyed our conversation today. I think you gave some really interesting and useful tips. And well, I think there'll be a lot of people who'll be listening to this that will really enjoy and appreciate your time today. So thank you very much. And I look forward to reading the book very soon.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mark. Happy to be here.
That was the Boss It podcast. If you have an idea, if you know somebody that you think would be a good guest for Boss It, if it's something to do with software technology and you think it would create a good topic, or if there's a topic that you've not seen covered in other podcasts, then reach out to me. Always willing to listen and to provide what's wanted. Thank you very much for listening. Bye-bye.